The great Forum station floated in the darkness between stars like a metal flower with 1,000 petals. Each petal was a docking bay big enough to hold ships from across the galaxy. Inside the station, beings from 847 different worlds walked the same corridors and breathed the same air. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others crawled on dozens of tiny feet. Some floated in special tanks filled with gas. A few were made of living crystal that sang when they moved. Ambassador Minho Kim stood at the great window of Conference Room 7, watching ships arrive and leave. He was a small man with kind eyes and gray hair at his temples. Behind him, 2 alien species argued about trade routes through the spiral arm. The Veltari looked like walking diamonds, tall and sharp, with light dancing inside their crystal bodies. The Nephirim were harder to see clearly. They were clouds of blue-green, gas that moved inside floating suits shaped like jellyfish. The Veltari speaker's voice rang like wind chimes. "Your ships poison our sacred crystals with your exhaust. We cannot allow this trade path to continue." The Nephirim's voice came through a translator, sounding like distant thunder. "We have used these routes for 300 years. Our people will starve if we must take the long path around your crystal fields." Minho had heard this same argument for 6 hours. Both species were getting angry. Soon they would storm out of the room. Then their fleets would gather at the border. Then there would be war. He had seen it happen before with other species. "May I suggest something?" Minho said in his quiet voice. Both aliens turned to him. The Veltari's crystal body flashed with irritation. The Nephirim's gas swirled faster inside his suit. "Human, we have heard enough of your people's ideas," the Veltari said. "You always want us to give up something." Minho smiled. "I was thinking about crystals. On my world, we have crystals too, very beautiful ones, but they are delicate. The smallest touch of acid will damage them forever." The Veltari stood straighter. "Yes, exactly like our sacred fields. But," Minho continued, "we found that crystals become stronger when they are exposed to certain minerals. The right kind of exposure makes them grow larger and more beautiful than before." He pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. A hologram appeared, showing the chemical makeup of Nephirim ship exhaust. "Your exhaust contains traces of dormalite gas. On Earth, we use dormalite to help crystals grow. Very small amounts, mixed with other elements." The Veltari leaned forward. Their inner light grew brighter as they studied the hologram. "You are saying our crystals might become stronger?" the Veltari asked. "I am saying we should test it. Take one small crystal field far from your most sacred ones. Let one Nephirim ship pass through it once per month. See what happens." The Nephirim's gas stopped swirling. "And if it works?" "Then we design new engines for your ships," Minho said. "Engines that produce exactly the right amount of dormalite to help crystal growth. You get your trade route. The Veltari gets stronger crystals. Everyone wins." For a long moment, both aliens were quiet. Then the Veltari's body rang with what sounded like laughter. "Human wisdom," the Veltari said. "You see solutions where we see only problems." 3 hours later, both species had signed an agreement to test Minho's idea. They left the conference room talking together instead of shouting at each other. "Captain," Nari Park was waiting in the hallway when Minho came out. She was younger than the ambassador, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore the blue uniform of the Forum Security Force. "Another miracle?" she asked with a smile. "Just common sense," Minho replied. "The Veltari love their crystals more than anything. The Nephirim need their trade routes to survive. Find a way to help both, and the problem solves itself." They walked together through the main corridor of the Forum. Thousands of beings moved around them. A group of insect-like Krath clicked and buzzed as they discussed mining rights. Tall, gray-skinned Drakmori in military uniforms stood in perfect formation, waiting for their turn to speak with the Trade Council. Near the information desk, a Family of small, furry creatures called Pixel asked for directions in voices that sounded like squeaking toys. "Sometimes I think we are the strangest species here," Nari said, watching a floating jellyfish creature drift past them. "Strange how?" Minho asked. "We are the only ones who seem to care about everyone else's problems." It was true, Minho thought. Humans had been part of the Forum for 200 years. In that time, they had helped solve over 3,000 disputes between alien species. Other races focused on their own needs, their own territories, their own people. Humans seemed to feel pain when any intelligent being suffered. They reached the central hub of the station, a great round space with a dome made of clear metal. Above them, stars and nebulae painted the darkness with color. In the center of the hub stood a statue made from materials donated by every member species. It showed hands and claws and tentacles all reaching toward the same point, touching at the tips. The inscription below read, "Different paths, same destination, unity in diversity." Director Jiho Lee was waiting for them near the statue. He was older than both Minho and Nari, with deep lines around his eyes from years of careful work. As the human administrator for Forum operations, he managed everything from ship schedules to diplomatic protocols. "Good work today," he said to Minho. "The Veltari and Nephrim agreement will prevent a war that could have killed millions." "Any word from the High Council meeting?" Minho asked. Jiho's expression grew serious. "Councillor Doyun is still there. The debate about the Outer Rim territories is getting heated. 3 species want to claim the same systems. The Outer Rim was always a problem. It was the edge of known space, full of new worlds and resources. Every few years, expanding species would bump into each other out there and start fighting over who had the right to settle which planets. The Krath want the metal-rich worlds. For their hives, Jiho explained, the Drakmori claim the whole sector as their natural expansion zone. And the Nexus Collective says they found those systems first with their scout ships. "What does Councillor Doyen think?" Nari asked. "He is trying to suggest a joint colonization project. Shared costs, shared benefits. The 3 species could work together instead of fighting." Minho shook his head. "The Krath will never share territory with anyone. Their hive instincts are too strong. The Drakmori think cooperation is weakness. And the Nexus Collective trusts only their own machines." "So, what do we do?" Jiho asked. Before Minho could answer, an alarm chimed softly through the hub. It was not an emergency signal, just a notice that an important announcement was coming. The thousands of beings in the hub stopped their conversations and looked up at the displays mounted on the walls. The face of High Counselor Vextai appeared on every screen. He was a Zenthari, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His blue-scaled face and large golden eyes showed the wisdom of his 800 years. "Citizens of the Forum," he said, in a voice that carried clearly through the translation systems. "Today marks the 3,000th anniversary of the Great Peace. For 3 millennia, the species of this galaxy have settled their differences through words instead of weapons. We have built something beautiful together." Around the hub, beings of all kinds began to clap, chirp, buzz, and make whatever sounds their species used to show approval. "In these 3,000 years," the High Counselor continued, "no member species has done more to preserve the peace than humanity. In the 2 centuries since they joined us, humans have prevented over 300 wars and helped negotiate treaties that have saved countless lives." The applause grew louder. Several aliens nearby looked at Minho, Nari, and Jiho with respect and gratitude. A small pixel creature came up to Minho and touched his hand with one tiny paw, squeaking something that the translator rendered as, "Thank you for helping my people." But not everyone looked happy. In the shadows near the far wall, a group of Krath warriors stood motionless. Their insect eyes reflected the light from the screens, but their expressions were unreadable. Near them, a squad of Drakmori officers watched with faces like stone. And floating at the edge of the crowd, 3 members of the Nexus Collective hummed with electronic communication that their translators did not share with others. The human gift for understanding different minds and hearts has made them the galaxy's greatest peacekeepers, the High Counselor said. Today we honor not just the anniversary of peace, but the species that has worked hardest to protect it. As the announcement ended and the crowd began to disperse, Minho noticed the groups of Krath, Drakmori, and Nexus Collective members moving toward the same exit. They did not speak to each other, but they walked in the same direction. "Did you see that?" Nari whispered. Minho nodded. "Yes, and I do not think it was a coincidence." Something cold settled in his stomach as he watched the 3 groups disappear into the crowd. For the first time in years, Ambassador Minho Kim wondered if all of humanity's good work had made them enemies as well as friends. The Festival of Unity began 3 days after the anniversary celebration. Every year, all Forum species gathered to share their cultures through food, art, music, and stories. The great station filled with wonderful smells, strange sounds, and beautiful displays. Humans loved this time because they could learn about new worlds and make friends with beings they had never met before. Ambassador Minho Kim walked through the festival halls with a smile on his face. He stopped at booths run by dozens of different species. The Veltari had created a crystal garden that sang different melodies when people walked through it. The Nephrim offered rides in their floating gas suits, letting visitors experience life as a cloud being. Even the usually serious Drakmori had set up displays of their military history, though they kept their weapons locked away during the peaceful celebration. At the human booth, Dr. Hyejin Song was showing alien children how to make paper airplanes. She was a xenobiologist who studied how different species work together. The children came from many worlds. Some had fur, others had scales, and a few were made of living metal. But they all laughed the same way when their paper planes flew in circles around the room. "Humans are wonderful teachers," said a Zenthari elder watching the scene. "You have a gift for making learning fun." Hyejin smiled as she helped a young Krath fold the wings on its plane. "Children are the same everywhere. They want to explore and discover new things." But while the festival continued above, something dark was happening in the lower levels of the station. In a maintenance room deep inside the Forum's hull, 3 very different beings sat around a metal table. They should have been enemies. Instead, they were planning together. General Krextar of the Krath military clicked his mandibles as he spoke. His insect body was covered in black armor, and his 6 arms moved constantly as he gestured. "The humans have made our people weak. They solve every problem with talk and compromise. Warriors are forgotten. The strong serve the weak." Across from him, Admiral Zordan of the Drakmori nodded his gray head. His people valued strength and conquest above all else. "My ancestors built an empire that stretched across 50 systems. Now we ask permission to expand into empty space. The humans have taught us to beg instead of take." The third being at the table was not like the others. Node Prime 7 of the Nexus Collective was more machine than living creature. Its metal body hummed with electronic thoughts, and blue lights blinked where its eyes should be. When it spoke, its voice had no emotion at all. Analysis confirms both assessments. Human mediation has reduced conflict by 91%. However, it has also reduced natural selection pressure. Weak species that should have failed now survive under human protection. The galaxy grows soft. General Krextar pulled out a data pad and placed it on the table. "We have what we need. Financial records from human colonies, communication logs between human diplomats, trade agreements that show patterns. Patterns that look like manipulation when seen the right way," Admiral Zordan added with an ugly smile. Node Prime 7's lights blinked faster. "The fabricated evidence is complete. Banking records show humans receiving secret payments from 17 species. Communication logs show diplomats sharing private information between negotiations. Trade agreements reveal systematic bias toward human colony interests." "Perfect," General Krextar said. "Tomorrow, during the Unity ceremony, we present our evidence to the full Forum Assembly. By evening, the humans will be expelled from the station." "And then?" Admiral Zordon asked. "Then the galaxy remembers what it means to be strong," the Krath general replied. The next morning, Ambassador Minho Kim stood in the Great Assembly Hall preparing for the Unity ceremony. Thousands of beings filled the curved rows of seats that rose up around the central speaking area. Each species had a section decorated with symbols of their homeworld. Banners and flags from across the galaxy created a rainbow of colors under the bright lights. Captain Nari Park stood near the security station, watching the crowds with her trained eyes. Something felt wrong, but she could not say what. The alien delegates seemed more tense than usual. Small groups whispered together and looked toward the human section with strange expressions. Director Jiho Lee sat with the other administrators, reviewing the ceremony schedule on his datapad. Counselor Doyen Choi was supposed to give a speech about cooperation and friendship between species. After that, there would be cultural presentations from 12 different worlds. High Counselor Vextai raised his hand for silence. His ancient voice carried clearly through the hall. "We gather today to celebrate what makes us strong. Not our weapons or our fleets, but our ability to work together despite our differences." The crowd made sounds of agreement in hundreds of different ways. But Minho noticed that some sections remained quiet. The Krath, Drakmori, and Nexus Collective delegates sat without moving. "Before we begin our celebrations," the High Counselor continued, "General Krextar of the Krath has asked to address the Assembly on a matter of great importance." Minho felt his stomach drop. This was not on the schedule. He looked at Jiho, who shrugged with confusion. They had no idea what was coming. General Krextar walked to the center of the hall on his 6 legs. His armor clinked with each step, and his insect eyes reflected the lights like black mirrors. When he spoke, his voice was sharp and angry. "Fellow citizens of the Forum, I stand before you with a heavy heart. For 200 years, we have trusted one species above all others. We have given them our secrets, our hopes, and our faith. Today, I must show you how that trust has been betrayed." A holographic display appeared above the general's head. It showed what looked like banking records from human colonies. Numbers flowed across the screen, highlighting payments from various alien governments to human accounts. These records show that humans have been taking secret payments from Forum members. They pretend to be neutral mediators, but they work for whoever pays them most. Gasps and angry sounds came from all around the hall. Minho jumped to his feet. "Those records are false! We have never taken payments for our mediation services." "Silence!" General Krextar shouted. "There is more!" The display changed to show communication logs between human diplomats. The messages seemed to show humans sharing private information from one species with another. It looked like they were playing different sides against each other for their own benefit. "Your diplomats steal secrets from closed negotiations," the general continued. "They pretend to help both sides while secretly working to benefit human colonies. Every peace treaty you have made serves human interests first." More angry sounds filled the hall. Some species began shouting accusations at the human section. Others demanded explanations. The careful order of the ceremony dissolved into chaos. Ambassador Minho Kim walked to the center of the hall. His voice was calm, but firm. "These documents have been altered. I have served this forum for 30 years. I have never betrayed the trust of any species. Neither have my colleagues." "Prove it," Admiral Zordon called from his seat. "Show us your real records." "We will gladly open all our files for inspection," Minho replied. "But first, let experts examine these accusations. The alterations will be easy to find." Node Prime 7 stood up with mechanical precision. "Analysis unnecessary. Pattern recognition confirms human deception. Statistical probability of innocence, 0.03%. The machine's cold certainty seemed to convince many delegates who had been unsure. If the Logical Nexus Collective believed the evidence, it must be true. High Counselor Vextai raised his hand again, but the hall would not quiet down. Species that had been friends for centuries were now shouting at each other. Some defended. The humans, others demanded immediate expulsion. Fear and anger spread like fire through the assembly. "The humans read our minds," someone shouted. "They know our weaknesses." How else could they solve every dispute so easily? Another voice added, "They must be manipulating our thoughts." Minho felt the situation slipping away from him. Logic and evidence would not matter now. Fear had taken hold, and fear made people believe terrible things about their neighbors. Captain Nari Park's voice came through his earpiece. "Ambassador, we need to evacuate the human delegation. The crowd is getting dangerous." "No," Minho replied quietly. "We stand our ground. Truth will win in the end." But as he looked around the hall, seeing the fear and anger in thousands of alien eyes, he wondered if he was wrong. For the first time in his long career, Ambassador Minho Kim was not sure that words could solve this problem. The vote came 6 hours later. By a margin of 523 to 324, the Forum Assembly voted to expel humanity from the organization. They had 72 hours to remove all personnel and equipment from Forum space. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Minho stood once more at the great window of Conference Room 7. The stars looked the same as always, but everything else had changed forever. Captain Nari Park joined him at the window. "What do we do now?" Minho was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked toward the door. "We go home, and we remember this day. The galaxy has chosen fear over friendship. Now they will learn what that choice costs them." The news reached Earth 3 weeks after the expulsion. President Minji Kang sat in her office in the World Government Building, reading the official report from the Forum. Outside her windows, she could see the lights of New Geneva glowing in the evening darkness. Somewhere up there, among the stars, humanity had just lost its place in the galaxy. General Wu Bin Han stood at attention across from her desk. He was the commander of Earth's defense forces, a tall man with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. Behind him, scientist Yeji Shin waited quietly. She was young for her position as head of defensive technologies, but her mind was sharp as a laser. "Read it to me again," President Kang said, though she had memorized every word. General. Han picked up the datapad. "The Forum Assembly has voted to terminate humanity's membership, effective immediately. All human personnel, equipment, and vessels must withdraw from Forum space within 72 hours. Any violation of this order will be considered an act of war against the Forum Alliance." "And the reason?" the President asked. "Manipulation of diplomatic processes, acceptance of bribes, and violation of neutral mediation principles." General Han set down the pad with disgust. "All based on fabricated evidence." President Kang stood and walked to the window. Earth looked peaceful from here, but she knew that every major city was buzzing with angry crowds. Some people demanded war against the aliens who had betrayed them. Others wanted to send diplomats to fix the mistake. A few suggested that humanity should have nothing more to do with alien species ever again. "What are our options?" she asked. General Han stepped forward. "We could fight. Our fleet is smaller than the combined Forum forces, but our technology is more advanced. We have been sharing our knowledge with them for 200 years, while they shared little with us. In a war, we might surprise them." Scientist Shin shook her head. "Fighting would prove their accusations. They would say we were always planning to attack them. It would justify everything they believe about us." "Then what do you suggest?" President Kang asked. "Complete withdrawal," Shin replied. "Not just from the Forum, but from all alien contact. Close our borders, end all trade, stop all communication, show them what the galaxy is like without human help." The President was quiet for a long moment. It was a radical idea. For 2 centuries, humanity had been reaching out to the stars, making friends, building bridges between different worlds. To cut all those connections would be like tearing away. Part of what made them human. It would hurt our economy, General Han pointed out. We trade with 47 different species. Our colonies depend on alien resources and technology. Our colonies are all in human space, Shin answered. We have everything we need to survive on our own. We always have. We just chose to share with others because we thought it made the galaxy better. President Kang turned back to face them. Her decision would affect every human being alive and billions more who were not yet born. How long would we maintain this isolation? Until they learn, Shin said simply. Until they understand what they have lost. 3 days later, the withdrawal began. Human ships throughout the galaxy received the same order: return to human space immediately. All trade agreements were canceled. All diplomatic missions were closed. All communication channels with alien species were shut down. The galaxy watched in confusion as humanity simply vanished from galactic affairs. Human trading posts closed overnight. Human mediators left their assignments without explanation. Human ships that had patrolled dangerous space lanes for decades simply disappeared. At first, many alien species celebrated. The Drakmori military announced that they no longer needed to ask permission to expand their territory. The Krath declared that they could finally build their hives on any world they chose. The Nexus Collective began spreading their cybernetic improvements to species that had previously rejected them. But problems started almost immediately. The Veltari had been trading crystal formations to the Zephyrian Cloud Riders for 300 years. The trade had always been simple when humans helped translate between the two species. The Veltari communicated through light patterns and musical tones. The Zephyrians used chemical signals and electrical pulses. Without human translators who understood both languages, the negotiations fell apart in the first week. "You are trying to cheat us!" the Veltari representative sang in angry, clashing notes. "We offer fair trade as always," the Zephyrian replied, through chemical signals that smelled like rotting eggs to most other species. But the new forum translators only converted words, not meanings. They did not understand that light red, combined with a high musical tone, meant respectful disagreement in Veltari culture. They did not know that the egg smell was actually a Zephyrian expression of sincere friendship. The trade deal collapsed. Both species went away angry, believing the other had insulted them. Similar problems erupted across the galaxy. The Pixel tried to negotiate a defense treaty with the Kentari Union, but the talks ended when the Kentari thought the Pixel were making fun of their appearance. The Pixel had only been complimenting the Kentari's beautiful blue skin, but the forum translators made it sound like mockery. On Earth, former Ambassador Minho Kim watched the reports from his retirement home in the Korean mountains. He had served the forum for 30 years, but now he felt older than his 73 years. The news from space grew worse every day. Captain Nari Park, now promoted to Admiral, visited him often. She brought updates from the monitoring stations that humans still operated at the edge of their territory. The news was never good. "The Outer Rim situation is getting worse," she told Minho during one visit. They sat on his porch, drinking tea, and watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Tell me," Minho said. 3 species are fighting over the same systems. The Krath want the metal-rich worlds. The Drakmori claim the whole sector belongs to them. The Nexus Collective says their scout ships found it first. And the Forum? Nari shook her head. They tried to mediate. The meeting lasted 6 hours before it turned into a shouting match. Each species accused the others of lying. No one trusted the Forum mediators because they were not human. Minho sipped his tea. "What did we used to do in situations like this?" "You would have found something all 3 species needed more than territory. Then you would have shown them how to get it by working together instead of fighting. And now? Now they prepare for war. The war came 6 months after humanity's withdrawal. It started when a Krath mining ship entered a system claimed by the Drakmori. The Drakmori destroyed the ship without warning. The Krath responded by attacking a Drakmori colony. The Nexus Collective, fearing that the violence would spread to their territory, launched a preemptive strike against both sides. Within days, the conflict had drawn in dozens of other species. Old alliances crumbled as species chose sides based on fear rather than friendship. The Forum tried to stop the fighting, but their peacekeeping forces were weak without human support. They had always relied on humanity to prevent wars, not fight them. General Wu Benhan brought the casualty reports to President Kang's office. The numbers were terrible and growing worse every day. 17 billion dead in the first month, he said. The fighting is spreading faster than anyone expected. President Kang studied the tactical displays on her wall screens. Red zones marked areas of active combat. They covered nearly a quarter of the galaxy now. Any requests for our help? She asked. Hundreds, but they all come through private channels. No official requests from the Forum government. The president understood. The Forum leaders were too proud to admit they needed the humans they had expelled. But individual species were desperate enough to risk breaking Forum law by contacting humanity directly. What about our people? Any regrets about the isolation? General Han was quiet for a moment. Some. Our economists say we could be making huge profits by selling weapons to both sides. Our military wants to intervene to stop the killing. Our diplomats think we should offer to mediate. But most humans support the withdrawal. They remember the betrayal. They think the galaxy needs to learn this lesson. President Kang nodded. She had read the polls. 73% of humans supported continued isolation. They were angry about the expulsion, hurt by the accusations, and tired of being blamed for trying to help others. But she also read the casualty reports every day. Billions of innocent beings were dying because their leaders could not talk to each other without human help. How long could humanity watch the galaxy burn before their conscience forced them to act? The answer came sooner than she expected. 2 years after the withdrawal, the war reached the Forum station itself. The Nexus Collective, believing that only total cybernetic unity could bring peace, attacked the great station with a massive fleet. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Forum station was burning. Half of its sections were destroyed. The great assembly hall where species had gathered for 3,000 years was open to space. As President Kang watched the live feeds of the dying station, she knew that humanity's isolation was almost over. The question was no longer whether they would return to galactic affairs, but how they would return. This time, she decided, they would not return as naive peacekeepers who trusted everyone. The monitoring stations at the edge of human space never slept. Captain Sunwoo Bay walked through the control room of Deep Watch Station 7, looking at the screens that showed what was happening in the galaxy beyond. The news got worse every day. What had started as a 3-way fight over the Outer Rim had become a fire that was burning across hundreds of worlds. "Show me the latest casualty reports," he said to his communications officer. The numbers appeared on the main screen. Captain Bay had seen death before during his military service, but these numbers were beyond anything he could imagine. 47 billion beings dead in 2 years of fighting. Entire species were going extinct, not because anyone wanted to destroy them, but because the complex trade networks that kept their worlds alive had fallen apart. The gentle folk of SciFiPrime were dying because their world could not produce enough food to feed their population. For 300 years, they had traded their beautiful artwork to other species for grain shipments. But now the shipping lanes were full of warships instead of cargo vessels. No one would risk their ships to bring food to a peaceful world that had nothing to offer in return except paintings and music. The crystalline singers were facing the same problem. Their silicon-based bodies needed rare minerals that only existed on distant worlds. The mining companies that used to deliver these minerals were too busy making weapons for the war fleets. Without the minerals, the singers' bodies would slowly crumble into dust. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving another coded transmission from Forum Space." Captain Bay sighed. They got dozens of these secret messages every day. Desperate species begging humanity to return and help end the fighting. Some offered huge payments. Others promised to give humans anything they wanted. A few even admitted that the expulsion had been a mistake and asked for forgiveness. "Which species this time?" he asked. "The Veltari Crystal Council. They say their sacred crystal fields are being destroyed by radioactive weapons. They want us to mediate a ceasefire with the Drakmori Empire. And yesterday, the Nephrim Cloud Wanderers. Their gas ships are being used as targets for weapons testing. They want us to negotiate safe passage through neutral space." "Captain," Bay shook his head. Every message was the same. Species that had voted to expel humanity now wanted human help to save them from the chaos they had created. But they still would not make official requests through the Forum government. They were too proud to admit publicly that they needed the humans they had cast out. "Any word from Earth?" he asked. "President Kang is meeting with the Global Council today. The vote on intervention is expected tonight." On Earth, the debate had been raging for months. In the Great Assembly Hall of the World Government, representatives from every nation and colony argued about humanity's duty to the galaxy. Some said they had an obligation to help innocent beings who were suffering. Others argued that the galaxy had made its choice and should live with the consequences. Former Ambassador Min-ho Kim sat in the visitors' gallery, listening to the passionate speeches. He was too old now to serve as a diplomat, but his advice was still valued by the government. Next to him sat Dr. Chae-Young-an, a philosopher who had spent her life studying questions of right and wrong. "The galaxy is burning," said Representative Torres from the South American Federation. "Every day we wait, millions more beings die. How can we call ourselves human if we ignore such suffering?" "The galaxy chose to reject us," replied Representative Singh from the Asian Alliance. "They accused us of manipulation and betrayal. They said they did not need human help. Now they are learning what life without humans really means." Representative Kim from the Korean Republic stood up. "My grandfather served in the Forum for 30 years. He gave his life to keeping peace between the stars. Are we going to throw away everything he worked for because our feelings were hurt?" Dr. An leaned over to whisper to Minho, "What do you think? Should we go back?" Minho was quiet for a long moment. "The question is not whether we should go back. The question is how we go back. Do we return as the same trusting peacekeepers who were betrayed, or do we return as something different?" Before Dr. An could ask what he meant, alarms began sounding throughout the building. Emergency broadcasts interrupted the debate as news feeds showed the attack on the Forum station in real time. The great station that had been humanity's second home for 2 centuries was dying. Explosions tore through its metal hull. Atmosphere vented into space like blood from a wound. Ships tried to evacuate the survivors, but many sections were cut off from the docking bays. "The Nexus Collective has launched a full assault on Forum Station," the news anchor reported. "Their fleet of cybernetic warships is overwhelming the station's defenses. Casualties are estimated in the hundreds of thousands." President Kang stood up from her seat on the assembly floor. The debate fell silent as everyone watched the screens showing the destruction. "Emergency session," she announced. "All representatives, to remain in your seats. We vote now on intervention." But even as the politicians prepared to vote, another debate was happening in a secure military facility beneath the Swiss mountains. Admiral Tae-Hyung Jang, commander of humanity's deep space fleet, was meeting with his senior officers. They had been preparing for this moment for 2 years. "What is our fleet strength?" Admiral Jang asked. 18 battleships, 47 cruisers, and 130 destroyers, replied his second-in-command. All equipped with the new defensive technologies that scientist Shin developed during our isolation. The new technology was humanity's secret advantage. While the galaxy had been fighting, human scientists had been working. They had created energy shields that could stop any known weapon. They had built engines that could move ships faster than anything else in space. Most importantly, they had developed weapons that could disable enemy vessels without destroying them. "Time to reach Forum Station?" the Admiral asked. 16 hours at maximum speed. "And the political situation?" The intelligence officer stepped forward. She was a young woman named Colonel Hejung Lim, who had spent the last 2 years studying everything that was happening in alien space. "The galaxy is in complete chaos," she reported. "The Forum government exists only on paper. Most species have withdrawn from the Alliance to protect their own territories. 3 major wars are raging, with dozens of smaller conflicts. Trade has collapsed. Entire sectors have gone dark because no one is maintaining the communication relays. What about the species that expelled us? The Krath, Drakmori, and Nexus Collective? The Krath are fighting a civil war. Half their hive worlds want to continue the expansion, but the other half want to return to their traditional territories. The Drakmori Empire is fracturing as local. Commanders declare independence from the central government, and the Nexus Collective has become completely aggressive. They believe the only way to end the chaos is to convert every living being into cybernetic beings like themselves. Admiral Zhang nodded grimly. "So the 3 species that wanted to get rid of human influence are now destroying themselves and everyone else?" "Yes, sir. And there is something else. We have been monitoring communications from surviving Forum members. They are not just asking for our help anymore. They are begging for it. Some species are offering to become human colonies in exchange for protection." The room fell quiet as everyone considered what this meant. For 200 years, humanity had been just one species among many in the galactic community. Now they were being asked to become the rulers of that community. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted. "Message from President Kang. The Global Council has voted to intervene. We are authorized to take whatever action is necessary to restore peace to the galaxy." Admiral Zhang stood up and looked around the room at his officers. These men and women would soon face the largest military operation in human history. They would be fighting not to conquer the galaxy, but to save it from itself. "Prepare the fleet for immediate departure," he ordered. "But remember our mission. We are not going back as the same humans who left. We are going back as guardians. The galaxy had its chance to choose cooperation and peace. They chose fear and war instead. Now they will learn what it means to live under human protection, whether they want it or not." As the human fleet prepared to launch, secret messages flooded the communication networks. Species throughout the galaxy had learned that humanity was finally returning to space. Some messages welcomed the humans as saviors. Others warned that humanity had changed during their isolation and might not be the same peaceful mediators they remembered. But one message was different from all the others. It came from the ruins of Forum Station, transmitted by an old Zenthari diplomat who had been trapped in the wreckage for 3 days. "To humanity, wherever you are," the message said in a voice weak with exhaustion. "We were wrong. We were afraid of your power to understand us, so we convinced ourselves you were manipulating us. Now we see what the galaxy looks like without your wisdom and compassion. Please forgive us. Please come back. We need you more than we ever knew." The message reached Earth just as the human fleet was leaving the solar system. President Kang listened to it in her private office, with tears in her eyes. The human fleet arrived at Forum Station like ghosts returning from the dead. Admiral Taehyung Jang stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Harmony, watching the dying station grow larger on the main screen. Explosions still lit up sections of the great structure as Nexus Collective ships continued their attack. Debris floated in space like metal snow, each piece a part of the galaxy's history. "Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from 14 different species," his communications officer reported. They want us to accept them as human colonies immediately. No responses yet, Admiral Jang replied. Let them wait. Fear will make them more honest about what they really want. Captain Donghyuk Nam, the youngest officer on the bridge, watched the battle through the forward screens. His generation had grown up during humanity's isolation. They had no memories of the old days when humans and aliens worked together as friends. To them, the galaxy was a dangerous place that had rejected humanity and paid the price. Admiral, Nexus Collective ships are moving to intercept us, the tactical officer announced. 47 vessels, all heavily armed with cybernetic weapons. Admiral Jang nodded calmly. Show them what 2 years of human engineering can do. All ships, activate new defensive systems. Target their engines only. We disable, we do not destroy. The me. Nexus Collective Fleet opened fire first, sending streams of energy and metal toward the human ships. But something impossible happened. The attacks simply stopped when they hit the human vessels, as if they had struck an invisible wall. The new energy shields that scientist Yeji Shin had developed absorbed every shot without taking any damage. Return fire, Admiral Jang ordered. Precision strikes only. The human weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of trying to destroy the Nexus ships, they sent out pulses that shut down the cybernetic systems. One by one. The enemy vessels went dark and dead in space, their crews alive but helpless. Within an hour, the entire Nexus Collective fleet was floating powerlessly around Forum Station. Not a single being had died in the battle, but the message was clear. Humanity had returned with power that no one could match. On the Forum Station, the few surviving government officials watched the human victory with mixed feelings. Relief that the attack was over, but fear of what humanity's new strength might mean for the galaxy. High Counselor Vextai was old even by Zenthari standards. At 900 years old, he had seen the rise and fall of many civilizations. But he had never seen anything like what humanity had just done. They had defeated a powerful fleet without killing anyone. It showed both incredible technology and incredible restraint. A communication request came from the human flagship. The High Counselor accepted it, and Ambassador Minho Kim appeared on the screen. But this was not the same gentle diplomat who had left the Forum 2 years ago. His hair was completely white now, and his eyes held a hardness that had not been there before. "High Counselor," Minho said with cold politeness, "I see you are in need of assistance." "Ambassador Kim," the old Zenthari replied, We are grateful for your intervention. The Nexus Collective was about to destroy what remained of our station." "I am no longer an ambassador," Minho corrected. "I am now the special representative for galactic affairs. My job is not to ask for permission or negotiate compromises. My job is to restore order to this galaxy, with or without your cooperation." The change in Minho's tone sent chills through every being listening to the conversation. This was not the patient mediator they remembered. This was someone who had learned hard lessons about power and trust. "What are your terms?" High Counselor Vexatai asked quietly. Minho's expression did not change. "There are no terms to negotiate. There are only facts to accept. First, humanity will establish military bases in every sector of the galaxy. Any species that attacks another species will face immediate human intervention. And second, all trade disputes, territorial claims, and diplomatic problems will be referred to human arbitrators. Our decisions will be final and enforced by our fleets." "You are talking about ruling the galaxy," the High Counselor said. "No," Minho replied. "We are talking about protecting the galaxy from itself. You had 3,000 years to prove that different species could live together in peace. You threw that away because you were afraid of the only species that actually cared about your welfare. Now you will live under our protection, whether you want it or not." The communication ended, leaving the survivors on Forum Station to consider their new reality. Humanity had not returned as friends. They had returned as parents dealing with children who had burned down their own house. Over the next few days, the human fleet spread across the galaxy with impossible speed. Their new engines allowed them to travel faster than any other ships, and their weapons could disable entire fleets without causing casualties. Every major conflict was ended within hours of human arrival. The Krath Civil War stopped when human ships appeared over both sides of the fighting and announced that any further violence would result in immediate occupation of all Krath worlds. The Drakmori Empire's expansion was halted when human forces simply moved every ship they had sent to conquer new territories back to their home systems, their crews unharmed but thoroughly embarrassed. On Earth, President Minji Kang watched the reports with satisfaction and sadness. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but at the cost of everything they had once believed about friendship and cooperation between species. Dr. Chae-Young-an visited her in the presidential office on the day that marked 1 month since the intervention began. "Any regrets?" Dr. An asked. President Kang looked out at the stars through her window. "Many, but not about our decision. The galaxy chose fear over trust. Now they will learn to live with the consequences of that choice. And if they had chosen differently, if they had trusted us, then we would still be the galaxy's mediators instead of its guardians. But that choice was taken away from us. 5 years passed under the new order. The galaxy enjoyed a more stable peace than it had ever known, but it was a peace built on strength rather than cooperation. Human ships patrolled every trade route. Human arbitrators settled every dispute. Human bases stood on strategic worlds in every sector. Most species adapted to the new reality. Trade flourished under human protection. Wars became impossible when human fleets could appear anywhere in the galaxy within days. Even the most aggressive species learned to settle their differences with words instead of weapons, because they knew that violence would bring immediate and overwhelming human response. But there was no joy in this peace. The old forum had been rebuilt, larger and more beautiful than before, but it was different now. Human observers sat in every meeting, their presence a constant reminder of who really controlled the galaxy's fate. Decisions were still debated, but everyone knew that humans could override any vote they disagreed with. Ambassador Minho Kim, now in his 80s, stood once again at the great window of Conference Room 7. Outside, ships from hundreds of species came and went, but they all flew under human protection now. The galaxy was safe, but it was no longer free. Captain Nari Park, now Admiral Park, and commander of all human forces in the galaxy, joined him at the window. Her hair was gray now, and her face showed the weight of ruling an entire galaxy. "You think we did the right thing?" she asked. Minho was quiet for a long moment. "We did what we had to do. The galaxy made its choice when it chose fear over friendship. We made ours when we chose order over freedom. And if a young alien asked you today why humans came back after being treated so badly," Minho smiled sadly, "I would tell them what I told the High Counselor's grandchild yesterday. We came back because that is what makes us human. We cannot watch others suffer even when they have hurt us, but we also cannot pretend that betrayal does not have consequences." The child asked. "Me something else?" Admiral Park said. She wanted to know if humans and aliens could ever be friends again, like in the old days. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that friendship requires trust, and trust has to be earned. It took the galaxy 3,000 years to build the old peace, and only 3 years to destroy it. Building something new will take time." Outside the window, a small ship docked at the station. It carried a delegation of young beings from 12 different species, all born after the human withdrawal. They had come to study at the new Galactic University that humans had established on the rebuilt station. These young minds had never known the fear and hatred that had torn their parents' generation apart. Minho watched them walk through the docking bay together, talking and laughing as if species differences meant nothing. Perhaps there was hope for the future after all. Perhaps the children could build the friendship that their parents had destroyed. Maybe friendship is possible, he said to Admiral Park. But it will have to start over from the beginning. And this time, it will grow under human protection, whether the galaxy likes it or not. The stars outside the window continued their eternal dance, just as they had for billions of years. They had watched species rise and fall, civilizations bloom and wither, peace give way to war and war give way to peace again. Now they watched a galaxy learning to live under the guidance of the one species that had refused to give up on the dream of unity among the stars.